You know, 2 years ago, it was not possible to join this event. And so when Comrade President called this time, I could not say no, no, quite honestly. So I had to just find a way to make sure that I was able to join in this event. And I'm glad that it's been possible to come. The union doesn't just make us strong. Struggle also gives us memories. And building institutions and building a country actually is about memories, shared memories. And the major reason for that is Professor Festus Iyayi, who was a personal friend, and whom we never got quite the opportunity to mourn properly. And so Heroes Day is a day to mourn and remember and celebrate and be grateful for lives like that. And Professor Mahmoud Tukur as well. And so it's for me, therefore, a personal journey as much as any other thing. I want to, therefore, abide by the existing podium protocols and to say thank you as well to the ASUU on this particular campus, led by Professor Jurube in particular, who have made my presence here really quite comradely and a very personable one. I really must say thank you, sir. I just want to dispose of one particular issue and to say, to acknowledge my family from Kaduna. Gloria Ballason of House of Justice, and Georgia, who are here. Yes, I may have been born in Ihiala, but I have family from Kaduna and in Kaduna. Indigenous to Kaduna, not migrants into Kaduna. I need to make that point. When I was drafting what is now the Protocol on Statelessness in Africa, which actually was inspired by the issues in UNIJOS here, and the aftermath of the Bola Ajebola report in 2010. The distinction between indigenes and non-indigenes and all of that was central to that. And in this particular context, it's important to acknowledge my family in that context. But the theme for today is, the original theme I was given is Silence in the Ivory Towers in the face of national disaster/destruction. Who will rescue Nigeria? And there's a lot in that to unpack. In the time that we've got, I'm not so sure whether we can unpack it all. And I thought maybe the thing to do was to take a slice of it and turn it into the framework for our conversation. And in that sense, I've got written remarks, which I'm going to email to the host union chair. And when you see my remarks, my title is The Intellectual and the University in a Time of National Crisis. It's because my view is, as a thinker, a teacher, or an intellectual, the first thing you've got to do is make your ideas accessible and simple. Simplify them so that people can actually relate with and understand what you're saying. Sometimes, particularly those of us who are trained as lawyers, we are trained not to communicate, so that through obfuscation, we can make more money. And my attitude is, as I've unlearned, the Vice Chancellor reminded me this morning that some people think that I'm controversial. Lawyers are actually taught not to be controversial because we are taught not to communicate. So instead of telling you to that extent, I'll say pro tanto. What does pro tanto mean? And by obfuscating, you do not allow people to understand whether to agree or disagree with you. And so, because I have chosen not to speak in Latin, most Nigerian lawyers think I am controversial. But actually, if you cannot speak so that your own people can understand you, why did you go to school? And why are you a teacher? And so in that sense, my view is we need to communicate. And that's why, therefore, I choose to speak to the subject matter, the intellectual and the university in a time of national crisis. And particularly on Heroes Day, a country without heroes is a country lost. And in Nigeria, we cannot count national heroes in the sense of transcendental figures around whom every Nigerian can rally, partly because we've got a crisis of national identity, state legitimacy, and national belonging. So if you mention anybody as national hero, they will say, no, they belong to those people. They come from that part. And the first question we ask one another when we see is what? Where are you from? Where are you from in Nigeria is not an endearment. It's actually to pigeonhole you so that they can place you in a box and predict you whether or not you like it. So if your name is Chidi, you must support P2B. And if your name is Muhammadu, you must support Buhari. If you're Luwole, okay, you are wearing infinity cap. And that is the way we place ourselves, because we have not been able to imagine a country that is bigger than the sum of its different parts. And it is the role of the intellectual and the university to lead that reimagining of the country. Now, so I want to begin with laying out a bit of what I see as our crisis, and I see 5 crises. And then to describe as in which underpin Nigeria's challenges. I will then want to talk about the place of the university and the evolution of the Nigerian university and of the intellectual within it, and how the university has kind of changed to the role of co-optation of the university and the effort to transform the university through the pauperization of the intellectual, the material pauperization of the intellectual, and through that, the pauperization of ideas in the university ecosystem. And I'll then want to try and round up by addressing 3 things. One is the coloniality of the university system, the continuing coloniality of the university system, and our incapacity to transform the university system because of the abiding coloniality of the education project going back to the Berlin West Africa Conference, the General Act of Berlin of 26 February 1885. And then round off with a set of ideas on how we can reclaim the missions of both the university and of the intellectual. And my method is deliberately eclectic. I want to make this experiential and non-ideological as much as possible. And to update a piece of information in my introduction, I am the recently unemployed pro-chancellor of the Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu University. I've just been fired, and I'm proud to have been fired. Because the matters are in court, and my lawyer is in the room and has advised me that I am precluded from saying anything about those matters, I'm obliged to respect the circumstances because the courts have got to do their work without being disparaged by anyone or indeed being intimidated by anyone either. But I'm a named defendant in those proceedings, and I've got to respect the integrity of those proceedings. But something, I need to share a small story, a nugget, that hopefully will, in a way, it captured for me the present state of our university system. I became pro-chancellor of the Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu University, what used to be Anambra State University, in June 2024. In December 2024, I got a memo to approve 110 million naira for the purchase of rice for the staff of the university from the management. And I asked, why should the university be buying rice for staff of the university? I was told that was a tradition. And I asked the question, why can't staff buy rice for themselves? And I was told it was not done. That the thing to do is university buys rice and shares to the staff, which seemed odd to me. Because the transaction costs, the warehousing costs, and all of that didn't make sense. It makes more sense to give people the money if you're doing 13th month, and they can choose to buy rice or buy tuwo, or buy potatoes, or buy vegetables, or not buy anything at all and use the money to solve their problems. So I said, well, do the memo, send it to the Finance and General Purposes Committee, which as Pro-Chancellor I chaired, and we'll deal with it there. So I get to Finance and General Purposes Committee, and I ask them, justify buying rice as against giving people their money. And the only reason they could give me was that's how we've done it before. And I said, well, if you run the calculation, 110,000 million naira is 25% of our monthly wage bill. So can we prorate it? Every member of staff gets 25% of their monthly salary. Why is that a problem? Bursa is instructed, give everybody 25% of their monthly salary, let them do what they like with it. Do you oppose that? Even the people who were telling me to buy rice said they could not oppose it. I said, well, in the absence of any opposition, it is carried. If you know the amount of abuse I got for that. It turns out that people in the university leadership were rice farmers. And they had rice mills. And that money was going to finance their operations at the expense of the dignity of staff of the university. Because what was actually, it got worse. Because as part of this thing, they allocated to me as Pro-Chancellor 30 bags of rice. And am I an ant that burrows into rice? What am I doing with 30 bags of rice? Now, if you give me 30 bags of rice in the heart of a small insurgency, you give me a security crisis. Because I have to think about how I'm going to carry that rice through hungry people and warehouse it so that people will not steal it or attack my house because I have too many bags of rice. They allocated to me 30 bags. I was the chair of the committee who was going to approve this. And when I said, well, I've got two options, and it is either I sit and therefore refuse the rice, or I accept the rice and somebody else has to sit in order to approve this. I cannot approve 30 bags of rice to myself because that's a substantial benefit. They looked at me like I was mad. And I told every other member of the governing council of the committee, if you have to approve this rice for yourself, you've got to recuse yourself from this decision. That meant we would not be able to have a decision. In that event, that was how I started signing my death warrant as Pro-Chancellor. Now, the thing was that the number of people who started calling me about this became impossible. State government house was calling, senior politicians were calling, bishops were calling, archbishops were calling of all faiths. General overseers were calling, and here I was. But this is all I am. I swear, this is everything I am. I'm not bigger than this. All right? And I told them, I said, look, I don't have a bank account. I don't have a bank account. And they said, what do you mean? I said, yes. When I was going to the National Human Rights Commission in 2015, people thought there is money in public service. And so I decommissioned my bank accounts and transferred everything to my wife and daughter. So if I need money now, I go to them. That means if I need to finance a side chick, I have to go and ask my wife for permission. You see? Now, because these people were coming to ask me to do things I didn't know how to do. I said, look, I can give you my wife's number or my daughter's number. If you can persuade them and you give them the money, that's fine. But you cannot pay money to me because I don't have a bank account. And before they accept the money from you, they will ask you, Chidi, who is this your friend who is trying to give us money? So in all likelihood, you're not likely to succeed. But the number of people who were calling me over bags of rice in a university was disturbing. And I then found out that in a good number of other places, this was it. But then something about this story was very heartening. When they started getting the alerts, the amount of prayers I got was equally disturbing. Because professors, for the first time, said, you know, this is the first time we ever got money like this since we were in this university. Thank you very much. May God do this. May God do that. And I'm like, God do this for this thing that is less than a pittance? Professors were sending prayers to me for receiving 256,000 naira in December. And I shed more than a tear for our university system. Because a university and the pursuit of ideas is underpinned by one concept: dignity. It takes dignity to pursue ideas. It takes dignity to pursue justice. It takes dignity to be a teacher. Both of my parents were teachers. They had 10 children. They graduated, every one of us, with at least a first degree. And the only thing they sold to us was the promise of dignity and a certificate. They did not have land. They had things that money could not buy. And they asked us to aspire to things that money could not buy. And today, our university system has been reduced to a place where methodically, the leaders of ideas and those who shape our society are denied of dignity. And therefore, we cannot produce students who have dignity, because a university is a system not just for pursuit of ideas, but for the transformation of every political economy and the replication of values in the system. If you don't have dignity, you cannot give it. And if the political system spends all of its energy denying the people who run ideas of dignity, it cannot replicate dignity. And that's why I want to begin by looking at the crisis of our country. In 1968, February 1968, I believe to be exact, in 87 Political Studies Quarterly, Ali Mazrui, who I believe has a history with this particular university, wrote a seminal article in Political Science Quarterly. The title was Political Assassinations in Africa. Mazrui's article explored the phenomenon of political assassinations in post-colonial Africa. And he theorized, he laid out the twin challenges of every post-colonial African country, which, of course, every post-colonial African country is multi-ethnic, many other things. The only two that are not are also the two that have had more problems than most. Somalia, which is made up of only Somalis, and the country formerly known as Swaziland, that's Eswatini, which only has Swazi. But he said, we've got two major crises. One of state legitimacy, legitimating the maps that were drawn at the end of the Berlin West Africa Conference into political realities that people could relate with. And the second was a crisis of integration, enabling people to know that irrespective of whatever happens, they are part of one political entity. Now, the one African country where political leadership has reimagined itself into an acceptance of the problem of legitimacy is both legitimacy and integration is also the African country that now has a problem of Afrophobia, South Africa. Because at Polokwane in 1953, the African National Congress boiled down its entire mission to one sentence: South Africa belongs to everyone who lives in it. Can we say that of Nigeria? Nigeria belongs to everyone who lives in it. If you believe in that, raise up your hand. You see our crisis right there. Because inside this country, we are not Nigerians. We are Tarok, Ibibio, Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, Efik, Fulani, you name it. It can go on. Kanuri. You can continue. We are 380 ethnic and national groups, or 389 to be exact, over 500 linguistic groups. The only minorities in Nigeria are who? The Nigerians. I swear to you, the only people who are minorities in this country are Nigerians. If you're asking for Fulanis, there are millions of them. Millions of Igbos, millions of Yorubas, millions of Berom. As for the people who are willing to self-identify as Nigerians, they are the minority. The only places you find them are airports that are heading out. Border territories that are heading out. But once we are in here, the Nigerians become the minority. That is our first and central crisis. A crisis of state legitimacy and a crisis of national integration. And the politicians want it that way. And they are trying to foist that on our universities. Because when Comrade President was mentioning the names here this morning of previous leaders here, you hear Nigeria. They come from everywhere. That is what our universities used to be. Can we say that is what our universities are today? Because if you cannot imagine a university as a microcosm of the country, you already have a problem. The second is leadership and civics. I'm not going to say much more on that because I suspect many people here have read Chinua Achebe's The Problem with Nigeria. And if you've read it, he's identified the crisis of leadership and civics in Nigeria quite well, articulated it quite well. I don't want to improve upon that. I cannot. I lack the skills to do so. Obviously, you cannot be in JOS without acknowledging, because of the problems, the chapeau problems of state legitimacy, integration, leadership, and civics, we naturally have a problem of insecurity. The insecurity crisis in Nigeria is a symptom of the underlying structural problems. It is not a problem on its own. It is a symptom. If we could look beyond and look at the structural issues, insecurity will be diminished. I've led the Truth, Justice, and Peace Commission in Southeast Nigeria, and I remember, not just now, but also at the National Human Rights Commission, I used to have a very deep, personal, intimate insecurity crisis. Threats from everywhere, all manner of things. And I remember going to the national leadership then and asking for protection. And they laid out a plan to protect me that was quite honestly scandalous. I was going to have sirens there, all these people there, and over 50 security assets protecting me because of the nature of the problem. And I asked the senior official of state who was laying this out, how do you want me to pay for this? With what money? Because every security person around you needs money to look after them. How am I going to pay for this? He said, don't worry. I said, no. If government is going to be paying for this amount of security for me, then I'm not worth it. So I looked at him. I said, sir, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in God? He said, of course, yes. I said, good. Give me your hand. Let us pray. I'm not a very prayerful person, I've got to admit. But I said, let us pray. I have faith. So I held his hand. I said, sir, pray with me. If what I'm trying to do is of God, may he protect it. If it is not of God, may the people who are trying to destroy it succeed. Say amen. He said amen. I said, let's go. I said, that's the protection I need. If the people want to kill me, let them kill me. And I left him. What happened subsequently tells me this country is terrific. This country is extraordinary. It is just that we are unwilling to give it a chance. Because I got protection from people I did not know. I got protection from senior generals who were willing to tell me, if you go there, you will not return alive. These are the plans that have been made to eliminate you. One called me one day and told me, where are you? I said, this is where I am. And he said, you know what? I need you to come and see me right away. So I went. And he said, they are going to kill you. And if they kill you, your blood will be on my hands because I know the plans. So trust me to protect you. You will not see me, but just trust me, nothing will happen to you. I'd never met this man before. And none of them was Igbo. Not one person who tried to lay their career online for me was Igbo. So when you tell me to come to Jos, this is why I'm in Jos, because they came from everywhere in this country, including here. And that idea that goodness resides everywhere in this country is an idea that must be propagated by our universities. Central to the mission in our universities and central to our pedagogy as teachers. Unfortunately, sometimes we fail to do that as teachers in our Nigerian universities. And that resonates in one more thing, therefore, our crisis of productivity and our crisis of cost of living. Because we are unable to imbue in our students and our products the degree of excellence, moral as well as skill, that everyone who passes through our universities should acquire and should be equipped with. And increasingly, therefore, our universities replicate the extractive model of the post-colonial state, particularly at certain levels, maybe not yet at the pervasive level in the federal universities, but certainly at the state universities and at some private universities. There is a very extractive model that objectifies students and their families as sites of wealth transfer or asset transfer from them and their families to the teachers and the people who run the universities. That, I think, is one part of our university system that we've got to address. But why? What is the real crisis that we've got? In 1988, the University of Nigeria and Nsukka actually addressed precisely the issue we're addressing today, who will save Nigeria. And they invited Chinua Achebe to address that meeting. And Achebe said something which I want to read in exactly the words in which he said them, because he later published them, I believe, in 2009 in his book, The Education of the British Protected Child, which is a collection of essays. I want to read him if you will permit me, Mr. Chair. The universities and other elite centers with deep knowledge of national and world issues can play a role somewhat analogous to that undertaken by kingmakers of the past, not in selecting the king themselves, but by spreading in advance general enlightenment and a desire for excellence in the entire constituency of the nation. Spreading in advance general enlightenment and a desire for excellence in the entire constituency of the nation, including those who will aspire to national leadership. We must admit that the Nigerian university has not quite acquitted itself too brilliantly in this regard in the past. The university man who has sallied forth into national politics has had a rather dismal record. No one can point to any shining achievement in national politics which the nation can recognize as the peculiar contribution of university men and women. Rather, quite a few of them have been splashed with accusations of abuse of office and other forms of corruption. Those who have sallied forth but remained in the ivory tower have hardly fared better. Many have cheapened themselves and eroded their prestige by trotting up and down between the campus and the waiting rooms of the powerful, vying for attention and running one another down for the entertainment of the politician. And in conclusion, Achebe says that the university has deservedly lost its mistake and squandered the credibility which it had in such abundance at the time of Nigeria's independence. This was 1988. Now, what has happened? What happened before or since then? Today, Nigeria, I believe, has about 312 universities. Correct me if I'm wrong if you've got more up-to-date figures. There are 67 state universities, 77 federal universities, and about 168 private universities. The population of the student community is just about 3 million. And although we've got 168 out of 312 as private universities, the private universities account for just about 10% of the university population. How did we get there? The year 1981 is critical. Until 1981, education was a public good in Nigeria at all levels. That's primary, secondary, and tertiary, was a public good, financed essentially by the state. Federal government took a huge stake, and basic education was concurrent legislative list. In the 1979 Constitution, education was moved to the concurrent list, lock, stock, and barrel, primary, secondary, tertiary. It ended up in court. Between 1981 and 1985, 3 court cases changed the landscape of Nigerian education and changed the landscape of everything we understand as how we work it. Because it's important to situate this conversation in 2 things. One is nation building and state building. The other is the right to education. Without that, it's impossible to realize the full mission of the intellectual and the university in the ecosystem that we speak to. What were the cases? Number 1, Archbishop Okojie and Lagos State. I don't know whether anybody remembers that case. Those who teach law may remember it in teaching either constitutional law or administrative law. That was the case about private proprietorship of high schools in Lagos. But the Court of Appeal, in deciding Okojie's case, made one fundamental point: that education, when provided by the state, is a public service, but when provided by a private individual, is property. So they were protecting private schools, not as a public good, but as the right to property of the proprietors of the schools. That set us down the road of an extractive ecosystem, particularly in the private schools. The second case was Basil Nanukebu and Attorney General Imo State, 1983, where the Supreme Court decided that private universities and private providers had a place in the ecosystem of university provisioning in Nigeria. Of course, the first private universities did not eventually get started until about 1999, Okada, Madonna, and all of that. But in Basil Nanukebu's case, the Supreme Court ended the monopoly of the Nigerian state, particularly of the Nigerian federal government, on tertiary education. 2 years earlier, in 1981, Sam Bakwe in Imo State and Ambrose Ali in then Bendel State started off the first state universities in Nigeria. And now, of course, as I said, we've got 67 state universities in the country. The Imo State University and Bendel State University, now Ambrose Ali University, were the 2 first state universities in the country. And so the ecosystem started ramifying. The third was Akintemi and Onwumechili, which decided in 1985 that the university is actually an ecosystem underpinned by law. The thing that got me fired, ultimately, was saying and professing that as pro-chancellor, I had only a 1-point agenda: to return the university to an ecosystem of legality. Because when I got appointed pro-chancellor, the first request I made, I was telling Comrade President yesterday, was, where is the university law? Can I see it? It took me over 3 months to find it. You know, something this simple. It took me over 3 months to get a copy of the university law. When I got it, much of it was hardly legible. I had to make a very serious effort to be able to read it. Then to get the university, you will think that the university law, first thing, if you're a public university or if you're a private university, your charter should be where? On your website. Nobody has to struggle to find it. It took me 9 months to persuade my university as pro-chancellor to put the university law on the website. When the university is not a place of legality and of basic rules, you know you have a crisis. Because The thing about law and legality is it protects all of us, even when you think it is not working very well. I am a rogue. I'm considered a rogue lawyer today because a lot of people think I go around abusing judges. I don't abuse judges. I take judging seriously. My dad spent a lot of time judging cases. I abuse bad judges, and I'm happy that I do so. Because somebody has to do it. There is nothing, no amount of money, no amount of property, no amount of anything can pay for injustice. Nothing. The other day, a Nigerian billionaire was calling me. I don't have money. I don't have a bank account. This is a billionaire in dollars. He was at the heart of injustice. And he called me and he said, tell me what you will need to help me work on this case. He finished. I told him, thank you, sir. I don't take money for what I do. Because if I accept money from you, people will say, oh, is it that one? Once you pay him, he will open his mouth. Send me all the papers in your case, no matter how big they are. If your case involves injustice, don't worry, I'll buy it over. Don't worry how I pay for my way. He said, what do you mean? I said, I will not accept money. I don't take money from you. I could have asked for $100,000 or more. He could have paid me easily. I said, no, I will not take your money. Because why was he looking for me? He was looking for somebody to say something that his multi-billion-dollar worth lawyers could not say. Every society needs people who can do things that the priciest lawyers cannot do. They are in this room. It is you. It is you. It is those of... There are things you can say, there are places you will go to, there are issues you will take up that the richest Nigerians and most powerful Nigerians cannot do. That is why you're powerful. That is why your power is inestimable. And that is why those who seek to destroy your power do not wish us well. Who wish to destroy the power of the intellectual in Nigeria do not wish the country well. Who wish to destroy the educational system in the country do not wish the country well. So they want us to produce yes men. That's why I've never agreed with asking students to wear uniforms. The university is a place where you can also rebel. The university is a place where you can also disagree. So you tell students to wear uniforms. Are they in secondary school? They're adults. They've got to learn to make mistakes and to accept responsibility for the mistakes, including disciplinary responsibility. But no, we insist students have to wear uniforms, and we create regimental systems in universities. And so what do? You destroy the capacity of society to sustain informed debate. And when a child graduates from university, never having disagreed, never having contemplated disagreement, never having quarreled with anybody, never having looked at a lecturer and said, but sir, are you sure you are right about this? And goes into the state to run an office, you will not understand why they will not brook any disagreement from anybody in the place where they work. This is how we planted the seeds. And being an intellectual, therefore, is a burden. It's a burden of awkwardness. And for those who do comparative literature, Milan Kundera's, my classic is Milan Kundera's book of Laughter and Forgetting. If you go to page 5 of Book of Laughter and Forgetting, there is a very classic line in it. He made love to me like an intellectual. Intellectuals are people who are supposed to be so awkward they cannot even make love properly. This is not my judgment. This is, please, for those, if you've not read Book of Laughter and Forgetting, try and read it. Because a teacher, now what's the primary mission of the university? Because the ecosystem of the university system in Nigeria is set by the public university. I like to define the university's mission in Nigeria. with reference to the laws that set up our universities, whether it's federal or state. The primary mission is very simple: teaching, research, certification of, and community service. And let's not save Nigeria, let's save the university system first. Because if we can save the university system, we will have saved Nigeria. That's really the gist of my message here. We've got to try and save the university system. And saving the university system means what? Returning it to a place of two things: ideas and dignity. You know, people talk about morality. I'm not worried about morality. Why? Because dignity embodies morality. Everybody who carries themselves with dignity carries themselves with a moral compass that is coherent. That's why I worry about dignity. So, as pro-chancellor, because all of these things, some lecturers said, oh, you know, I cannot accept a child coming to my class with miniskirts. I just asked them to go away. And, you know, you cannot do that in my class. And this other one said, you cannot wear dreadlocks in my class. I said, who are you? Are you God? You see, you are talking like a soldier. You're not running a cantonment. You're running a university. And what you are failing to do is to accept the discipline of persuasion. You see, you can make the same point to these young people, but differently. So, I called a young girl. I said, come, let me demonstrate something to you. She was wearing miniskirt. I called her, what's your name? How are you? She told me. I said, this thing where you wear like this, huh? You know, say if you ride Okada exhaust catch you, wahala don't enter inside. You're destroyed forever because the boys will not be interested in you anymore. And all that Okada injury will label you forever. Is that what you want? She looked at me, and I knew I had struck a chord. I took her name, I took her number. The following week, this girl was wearing trousers. She had changed. She had reasoned it through. And the thing we do is, as professors and teachers, we do not accept the challenge of pedagogy. Break these things. Challenge the young people. And you will see that you will get to exactly that same destination, but their agency and their dignity will be improved. And they will be the people spreading your message. That is why the challenge of pedagogy is important. And pedagogy that is coherent and philosophically founded. That is why colonial education is the worst thing that happened to us. Why is that so? And it began, colonialism basically was an exercise in three things: hollowing out our being, hollowing out our doing, and hollowing out our essence as a people, our coherence as a people. It started with an attack on our notion of God, the Almighty. Because if you do not have a relationship bigger than you cannot be a leader. To lead, you have to believe in something much bigger. Call it anything. But you've got to believe in something much bigger than you. You've got to have faith in something radical. And that faith makes you arrogant. I tell my students, I don't teach you to be humble. I teach you to be arrogant. So when you face somebody like one minister who goes around addressing press conference every weekend and abusing everybody, you can actually tell yourself, I am bigger than this person. That is the only way I can face them. And tell yourself, not because you're joking, but because you mean it. You don't have money. You don't have a car. So how can you be bigger than him? Because your ideas are bigger than him. And actually, when they listen to you and your conviction, they become afraid because they believe there is a ghost in the forest somewhere beating the drums that you're dancing to. It is a con trick. It is in the head. And that is the first thing as a leader, as a teacher, you've got to give your students. And that's for me, I'm not saving Nigeria anymore. I want to save the university ecosystem. If we can save it, we will save the country. We will produce students and leaders who will take the country by the scruff of the neck and turn it around. and forge a country in which everybody will believe that they belong. It will become immaterial where you come from. And I go around, I went to a federal government college. And I have been to every state of Nigeria, and I can count family in every part of Nigeria that is not Igbo. And you don't understand what that means. It means everything in trying to forge a country. Because it means you cannot start off thinking that person is evil. And that part is not reachable. And my children cannot go there. People send their children from Umuahia to Meduguri. And they learned Kanuri over 5 years. Many of them married there. Those of them who did not marry there slept with people there. Because when you have slept with the people and they did not kill you, you need to be grateful. They slept with people there and they went back. It changed them. Now, I will sleep with somebody from another community. I wake up in the morning, I start abusing their community. And you forget that when you sleep with somebody, you become vulnerable. And yet, they are so bad, they did not kill you. They did not take your picture and put it on the internet, and you're still abusing them and you think you're normal. We've got to ask ourselves as teachers. That's why I said I'm not going to be ideological here. I want us to address practical human dimensions to our leadership role as pedagogy shapers. And as I try to end, getting back to colonial education, because this is where it all went wrong. I hope, and I really want to appeal to every teacher here, if you can, ask every student of yours to read the General Act of the Berlin West Africa Conference. It was adopted on the 26th of February, 1885, at the end of the Berlin West Africa Conference, which is really what created our countries. The General Act basically said that our civilization as a people, first of all, we did not exist. Our ancestors did not have any system of morality or ecosystem of institutions. And the guarantors of our well-being were going to be white people. To do that, they set up colonial education and gave it a civilizing mission. And I want to read from Article 6 of the General Act that the preservation of native tribes and the care and improvement of the conditions of their moral well-being became guaranteed by the 14 European powers and the United States. The preservation of native tribes, now we wait here, and the care for the improvement of the conditions of their moral and material well-being. And to do that, they set up colonial education to protect and favor all religious, scientific, or charitable institutions undertakings created or organized for the above ends, or which aim at instructing the natives and bringing home to them the blessings of civilization. Bringing home to us the blessings of civilization. And these were people who built empires, who produced such wealth that when Mansa Musa went to and returned from the Holy Lands, gold went dry in the world. He drove up the price of gold. The Seifawa dynasty is one of the longest ruling dynasties in the world. And Benin had a relationship with every civilization from China to Portugal well before the Brits ever thought of coming here. And yet, we were taught one thing: to lose confidence in ourselves and in our institutions and in our notion of God, the Almighty. And that is what we have given to our children and to our children's children. And for most of us, we've never revised our curriculums. And we're wondering how we are going to save Nigeria. So let me end with a personal testimony. I trained as a lawyer, as has been said here. Graduated, yes, at the top of my class, both at the law school and in the university, 87, 88. All through that period, I was taught one thing: judicial independence. That the British graduated us from the College of Colonialism with independent institutions. Judges who were independent, civil servants who were independent, and regimental traditions that were very straight. For 25 years, I lived with that. And the people who taught me that were the first generation of law professors in the country. Then one day, it struck me that that was nonsense. Colonialism was not based on rule constraint. It was based on arbitrariness. How could an arbitrary institution where judges were manifestly lacking in independence, because that was the case law, create independent institutions for you? It did not make sense. It struck me that everything I had been taught in law was a lie. I'm not joking. I'm being very brutally honest with you. That is why I have gone rogue. Because I cannot, as a teacher, go and tell my students in Nigerian legal system, first class as a law student, sources of Nigerian law are what? Once you go after local legislation, what are the sources of Nigerian law? Common law, doctrines of equity, statutes of general application in force in England on the 1st of January 1900. As a teacher, you teach that to your students in 2021, 25 or 26, and you say you are going to change Nigeria. You cannot. No, think about it. For those of you who are here or married to lawyers or judges, these are the sources of Nigerian law in 2026. Common law, doctrines of equity, statutes of general application in force in England on the 1st of January 1900. What changed in 1st of January 1900? The British government cancelled the Royal Charter of Royal Niger Company, which was set up in a relationship that nobody here should promote. Tubman Goldie was sleeping with a woman. What was the woman's name? What was Lord Lugard's wife's name? Flora Shaw. Tubman Goldie was sleeping with Flora Shaw. When his wife, as side chick, and he was speculating in Nigeria because he needed Flora Shaw to promote his colonial speculation. This is our history, and you need to know it. When his wife died, Flora Shaw propositioned him to marry him. He said no, he did not want to marry again. She was heartbroken. Lord Lugard, then Frederick Lugard, was also heartbroken from having been passed up by a woman in India where he was working. Both of them, at that point, hired by Tubman Goldie, started consoling one another. And eventually, they got married when Tubman Goldie returned to England, having collected his payoff. In that ménage à trois, Nigeria was born. And who will think that that is a relationship that you do not need to exercise before you can build a proper country? But that is how we were born. And in that relationship, issues have arisen. As leaders and as intellectual leaders, we need to change it. And those issues did not end there. Because when you continue, in 1918, June 1918, the Privy Council in England decided the case that controlled all of colonial life, Southern Rhodesia. And they said in that judgment that we, as black people in Africa, are so beneath civilization that nothing we did counted for anything. That was not speculation. This was law, handed down by the highest court in the land. And today, as teachers, we replicate all of that. And we've not challenged ourselves to change our curriculum. And instead, what do? We tell our students, if you don't spout this thing we give you, you will fail. So, to the question, who will change Nigeria? Who can rescue Nigeria? It is us. It is the union. It is the university. And we can change it. And the reason it is possible to change, that's why I have hope. They ask me, why are you always very excited? I said, I have hope. I sell hope in dollops because it is within our control to change the universities. Politically exposed persons cannot change the country for us. That is why they always seek to capture professors. They'll tell you, go and rig elections. You finish rigging elections, your retirement money will be caught up here. And because every money, my people have a saying, that the thing that comes from the side of the pot ends up in the side of the mouth. Right? When we were growing up, and I just want to end quickly. When we were growing up, the politicians were very powerful then. You name them. Buhari was so incensed when he took over power, he wanted to send all of them to jail. But he does not know that he did not know that Karma has a way of sorting these things out. Can anyone here name any one of those politicians from 1979 to 1983 whose children have made progress from the money they stole? Nobody makes progress from stolen money. Nobody. Name one child of billionaire, Adisa Akinloye, Suleiman Dakuma, Samba Kwe, name one that has made money and has continued in wealth or comfort. Many of the children are layabouts. It is your children. When you have done your work properly, it is your children that they are looking to buy in order to continue to subsist. It tells you there is a mission in teaching, in research, in intellectual leadership, in moral leadership, in the collective search for dignity, and in the collective search for nation building that nobody should be allowed to trifle with. It is bigger than any one of us. And on this day that we remember the heroes, and permit me to use the expression, sheroes, the heroes and the sheroes of our struggle for a bigger, better run country and a better run university system. Let's condescend on particulars. The place to start is the pastoral and intellectual role of the university in the search for dignity. Dignity that enhances the teacher. Dignity that rewards excellence. Dignity that protects the moral ecosystem in which young people will grow and grow properly. Dignity that enables us to accept the discipline of persuasion, the discipline of collective pedagogy, the discipline that we can be wrong. That is where humility comes in. That ideas in a university can only thrive on the basis of their falsifiability. That means every one of us can be wrong. And therefore, the children or young people can challenge us and know better. And if they know better, let's not stand in their way. Let us do what? Take pride in it. Let us encourage them. Let us propel them. Let's help them grow their networks and grow their wings. Let's not feel belittled by younger people. Because it is the same way that politicians will feel, since you don't have money, why are you challenging me? You're challenging the politician. You may not have money. You have something the politician cannot buy. It is here. Money cannot pay for what you are worth. And the final note on which I end, because the productivity of our universities is also going down. And people will tell you, well, we cannot pay for articles, to get articles into the journals, and if not, why so? Number one, promotions in the universities cannot be based on research alone. It's research, it's teaching, it is service calibrated to certain equations, correct? And I think the discipline of teaching in this society needs to be encouraged. And we've got to calibrate it in a way that makes sense. I currently teach in systems where certain lecturers don't like to see students. They tell you, okay, book a 15-minute appointment and we'll see you by Zoom. But there is something about intellectual mentorship that requires contact with students. And there is nothing that pays for that. And sometimes all it takes is that contact with the student to set them on their way. And so we've got to encourage teaching. We've got to encourage research. That means what? We've got to continue to produce journals that are not paid for. Not pay as you go. And I used to tell my colleagues at COOU, if you if you've not published before, at least in my own field, if you've not published before without paying, come, let us do a joint article. I will give you principal authorship. As a matter of fact, I'm happy to be your research assistant. I will place your piece once it is I judge it quality enough. We'll publish it, and you will not have to pay a dime. And I hope that because there are senior professors here, that professors can also take younger academics and intellectuals under their wings. You heard Professor Gomwalk here saying, this person was my student. And when he was saying that, I looked at his face. There is nothing that can pay for that look on his face when he said Professor Lai was his student. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And anybody who tells you, I'll buy you a car that will go and crash in the road and kill you, or somebody will come and abduct you because they think you have money, is not up to it. And I'll really encourage that if we have a hope of changing our country, transforming it for the better, don't think about the big country. Think about every day the small country you see in front of you. The thing about us is we go to church on Sunday, we go to the mosque on Friday, and in between we forget the people that Allah sent us to look after and God sent us to make better. If we can look at those people, particularly other people's children who have been sent into our care, there's nothing bigger than looking after other people's children. No. Looking after your children is a small thing. When you have to look after somebody's child, you understand. And the worst thing in the world is taking to somebody their child put in your care who has died, and you have to return a dead body to a parent who has brought a child to you. May it never happen to any of us. That's the note on which I want to hope to challenge us. As I said, I don't want to talk ideology. I could come here and speak theory. But having lost my job recently, I want to talk practical. Because there is nothing like losing your job to make you realize there are things in life that money cannot buy. And for everyone here, that's what I wish you. That you will get a job that you're not unwilling to walk away from. That nobody should feel that they can tell you to do things that your intellect and your conscience tells you you should not do. That no one, no matter how highly placed, and no amount of money is worth the idea of your dignity, the sale of your soul, the sale of your standing, or indeed the compromise of the ideals that we acknowledge when we say the union makes us strong. Thank you.